The forest screamed with silence, the kind that presses against your chest and makes every snap of a twig feel like a gunshot. I was 19, barely a man, clutching a rifle I didn't want to hold, trailing behind my dad's friend, Tom, who thought a weekend hunting trip in the Michigan woods would toughen me up. I didn't know then that a stranger, hidden among the pines, would unravel everything I thought I knew about myself. My name is Eli Carter, a lanky kid from a small town outside Lansing, where the biggest event was the annual fair and the only thing people whispered about was who missed church on Sunday. Dad had always been a man of few words, but after Mom left when I was 12, he spoke even less. He worked long shifts at the auto plant, and when he wasn't there, he was drinking with Tom, his buddy since high school. Tom was everything Dad wanted me to be, broad-shouldered, loud, and unafraid of anything, especially not the deer he hunted every fall. When Dad suggested I go with Tom for the weekend, I didn't argue. I never did. The air was crisp that October morning, the ground blanketed with leaves that crunched under our boots. Tom led the way, his rifle slung over his shoulder, his voice booming through the trees as he talked about tracking bucks and gutting them clean. I nodded, my stomach churning at the thought of blood. I wasn't like Tom. I wasn't like Dad. I'd always felt different. Not wrong, just out of place, like a puzzle piece shoved into the wrong box. I'd buried those feelings deep, under layers of flannel and fake smiles, because in a town like mine, different wasn't safe. Keep up, Eli, Tom called, glancing back with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. He didn't like me much. I could tell. He thought I was soft, too quiet, too much like Mom. I adjusted my grip on the rifle, its weight foreign in my hands, and trudged after him. The forest was vast, a maze of pines and oaks stretching endlessly, and I felt smaller with every step. By noon, we'd set up a small camp near a clearing. Tom was busy unpacking gear, muttering about the best spots for deer, when I heard Ida rustling, faint but deliberate, coming from the trees to our left. I froze, my heart hammering. Tom, I whispered, did you hear that? He waved me off. Probably just a squirrel. Don't get spooked, kid. But the rustling came again, closer this time, and I couldn't shake the feeling we weren't alone. I scanned the trees, my eyes catching a flash of movement, a figure, too tall to be an animal, darting between the trunks. Tom, there's someone out there, I said, my voice sharper now. He squinted into the woods, his hand resting on his rifle. Stay here, he ordered, stepping forward. But I didn't stay. Something pulled me, a tug in my chest I couldn't explain, and I followed him, my pulse racing. The figure was gone, but the air felt heavier, like the forest was holding its breath. We searched for an hour but found no thing tracks, no signs. Tom chalked it up to my imagination, but I knew what I'd seen. That night, as we sat by the campfire, the flames casting shadows that danced like ghosts, I couldn't shake the image of that figure. Who was out here, in the middle of nowhere? And why did I feel like they were watching me? The next morning, Tom was up before dawn, eager to hunt. I lagged behind, my eyes scanning the trees, half expecting to see the stranger again. We moved deeper into the forest, the terrain growing rougher, the air colder. Tom was focused, his eyes locked on the ground for tracks, but I was distracted, my thoughts tangled. I didn't want to be here, pretending to be someone I wasn't. I didn't want to kill anything. I didn't know what I wanted. Then I saw him. He stepped out from behind a massive oak, so sudden it stole my breath. He was young, maybe 20, with short black hair and eyes that seemed to see right through me. He wore a faded jacket and carried no weapon, just a small pack slung over his shoulder. Hey, he said softly, his voice calm but firm. like he wasn't surprised to see us. You guys lost. Tom spun around, his rifle half raised. Who the hell are you? He demanded. The stranger didn't flinch. Name's Julian. I'm just passing through. His gaze flicked to me, and for a moment, it felt like the world narrowed to just us. There was something in his eyes, kindness, maybe, or understanding that made my chest ache. Passing through. Tom scoffed. This ain't a hiking trail, kid. You got no business here. Julian shrugged, unbothered. I know these woods. Been coming here since I was a kid. You're the ones who look out of place. His tone was light, but there was an edge to it, like he was sizing Tom up. I stepped forward, ignoring Tom's glare. I'm Eli, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. We're hunting. Julian's lips twitched, almost a smile. Hunting? Huh. You don't strike me as the type. My face burned, but not from anger. He was right, and he'd seen it in me without even trying. Tom muttered something under his breath, but I barely heard him. Julian was still looking at me, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. Stay out of our way, Tom snapped, turning back to the trail. Come on, Eli. But I hesitated. Julian's presence felt like a lifeline, something real in a world that had always felt wrong. You live around here? I asked, ignoring Tom's impatient huff. Julian nodded. Not far. I come out here to think. Clear my head. He paused, his eyes searching mine. You ever feel like you need to escape? I swallowed hard. Yeah, I said, the word barely a whisper. All the time. Tom called my name again, sharper this time, and I forced myself to turn away. But as we walked, I felt Julian's gaze on my back, steady and warm. I didn't know it then, but that moment was the spark, the beginning of everything that would break me open and put me back together. The forest seemed to close in around us as we trekked deeper, the trees taller, the shadows longer. Tom's mood had soured since meeting Julian, his grumbling a constant drone about city kids and trespassers. I barely listened. My mind was stuck on Julian, his quiet confidence, the way his eyes seemed to see parts of me I'd kept hidden even from myself. We stopped to rest near a small stream, the water glinting under the midday sun. Tom was checking his rifle, muttering about a jammed bolt, when I slipped away, drawn to the sound of the current. I told myself I just needed a moment alone, but deep down, I was hoping to see him again. The forest had a way of making you feel like anything was possible, like the rules of the world didn't apply here. I didn't have to wait long. Julian appeared across the stream, crouching to fill a canteen. He looked up, catching my eye, and smiled a real smile, not the forced kind I was used to. Fancy meeting you again, he said, standing. Your friend, always that charming. I laughed, surprising myself. Tom's intense. He's my dad's friend, not mine. Julian nodded, stepping closer. Figured. You don't seem like you belong out here with him. I wanted to ask what he meant, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I sat on a rock by the stream, and he joined me, the silence between us comfortable, not heavy. So, I said finally, you really come out here just to think? Yeah, he said, his voice soft. It's the one place I can be myself. No expectations, no judgment. Just me. I envied that. My whole life felt like a performance pretending to be the son Dad wanted, the guy Tom respected, the kid who fit in. Must be nice, I said, staring at the water. I don't even know who I am half the time. Julian looked at me, his expression gentle but piercing. You'll figure it out. Sometimes it takes getting lost to find yourself. His words hit harder than they should have. I wanted to ask more, to spill everything I'd buried. But Tom's voice cut through the moment, barking my name from the trees. I stood, reluctant, and Julian gave me a small nod. "See you around, Eli," he said, and I felt a pang at how easily he said my name. That night, as Tom snored by the campfire, I lay awake, staring at the stars through the canopy. I couldn't stop thinking about Julian, his voice, his calm, the way he seemed so sure of who he was. I'd never met anyone like him, and it scared me how much I wanted to see him again. In my town, feelings like that were dangerous. I'd heard the slurs, seen the looks people gave anyone who didn't fit the mold. But out here, in the wild, those rules felt farther away. The next day, Tom was determined to bag a deer. He dragged me through the forest, his impatience growing with every hour we came up empty. I was useless, my mind elsewhere, my eyes scanning for Julian instead of tracks. By late afternoon, Tom was fed up. "You're not even trying, Eli," he snapped, his face red. "What's wrong with you?" I opened my mouth to answer, but nothing came out. What could I say? That I didn't care about hunting, that I was thinking about a guy I'd just met. Instead, I mumbled an apology and kept walking, my chest tight with shame. We were deep in the forest when it happened. A shot rang out, not Tom's rifle, but another, sharp and close. Tom cursed, grabbing my arm. "Stay low," he hissed, his eyes darting around. Another shot echoed, then a shout, angry, panicked. My heart pounded as we crept toward the sound, Tom leading with his rifle raised. We found them in a clearing, 2 men, one older with a grizzled beard, the other younger, maybe Julian's age, arguing loudly. The older man held a rifle, his hands shaking. "You don't belong here," he yelled, his voice slurred. The younger man, Julian, stood his ground, unarmed but unafraid. "Put the gun down," Julian said calmly. "You're drunk, and you're gonna hurt someone." Tom stepped forward, his own rifle aimed. "What's going on here?" he demanded. The older man swung around, his gun unsteady. "This queer's been sneaking around my land," he spat, glaring at Julian. The word hit me like a punch, and I saw Julian flinch, just for a second, before his face hardened. "He's not on your land," I said, surprising myself. My voice was shaky but firm. "He's just passing through." Tom shot me a look, but I didn't care. The older man laughed, a cruel sound. "Defending him? Huh. You one of them too." My face burned, and I felt Tom's eyes on me, judging. But Julian stepped closer, his shoulder brushing mine. "Let's go, Eli," he said quietly. "This guy's not worth it." The older man raised his rifle, and for a moment, everything stopped. I thought of Dad, of the town, of the life I'd been trying to fit into. Then I thought of Julian, and something in me shifted. I grabbed his arm, pulling him back as Tom shouted at the man to lower his gun. The tension broke when the older man stumbled, cursing, and Tom forced him to back off. As we left the clearing, Julian's hand lingered on my arm, his touch steadying me. "Thanks," he said softly. "You didn't have to do that." I didn't know what to say. All I knew was that standing up for him felt right, like the first honest thing I'd done in years. The encounter in the clearing left me shaken, my mind replaying the older man's slurred words and the way Julian's face had tightened. We hiked back to camp in silence, Tom muttering about crazy drunks, while I stole glances at Julian, who'd insisted on walking with us. His presence was a quiet anchor, grounding me even as my thoughts spun. At camp, Tom started a fire, his mood darker than the night sky. He didn't like Julian being there, but he didn't say it outright, just shot him sharp looks and kept his rifle close. Julian, unfazed, sat across from me, carving a small piece of wood with a pocket knife. The firelight danced across his face, highlighting the curve of his jaw, and I caught myself staring, my heart racing for reasons I couldn't name. "You okay?" Julian asked, his voice low so Tom wouldn't hear. I nodded, but it was a lie. That word queer kept echoing in my head, laced with the old man's venom. I'd heard it before, thrown around in school, at church, always as a weapon. But seeing Julian face it head-on, unflinching, made me question everything. Was it really something to be ashamed of? Or was the shame the lie I'd been fed? "You don't have to stay," I said, glancing at Tom. "He's not exactly welcoming." Julian smiled, a small, defiant curve of his lips. "I'm not here for him. I'm here for you." My breath caught, and I looked away, afraid he'd see too much. Tom stood abruptly, tossing a log into the fire. "I'm turning in," he said, his tone clipped. "Eli, keep watch for a bit." As Tom disappeared into the tent, Julian shifted closer. "He's not your biggest fan, is he?" I laughed weakly. "He thinks I'm a disappointment. Like my dad does." Julian's expression softened. "You're not a disappointment. You're just you. And that's enough." His words cracked something open in me, a dam I'd built to keep everything in. I wanted to tell him how lost I felt, how I'd spent years hiding parts of myself I didn't even understand. But instead, I asked, "How do you do it? Be so sure of yourself." He leaned back, his eyes on the fire. "I wasn't always. Growing up in a place like this, you learn to hide. But hiding eats you alive. One day, I just decided I was done pretending. Left home at 17. Found people who didn't care who I loved. It's not easy, but it's honest." I envied his courage. I'd never even let myself think the word Gale, let alone say it. But sitting there, with the fire crackling and Julian's steady presence beside me, I felt a flicker of something new. Hope. Maybe. The next morning, Tom was all business, determined to make up for the lost day. He barely acknowledged Julian, who'd slept under a tarp nearby. "You're not coming with us," Tom said flatly when Julian offered to help track. Julian shrugged. "Suit yourself. I'll be around." He looked at me, his eyes saying more than his words, and I felt a pull to stay with him. But Tom was already moving, and I followed, my heart heavy. We trekked for hours, the forest growing denser, the air colder. Tom was relentless, his focus on finding a deer almost obsessive. I tried to keep up, but my mind was elsewhere, replaying Julian's words, his smile, the way he made me feel seen. By midday, we'd found nothing, and Tom's frustration boiled over. "You're slowing me down, Eli," he snapped. "Go back to camp if you're not going to help." I didn't argue. I turned back, my steps lighter the farther I got from him. When I reached the camp, Julian was there, sitting by the stream, sketching in a small notebook. He looked up, surprised but pleased. "Couldn't stay away, huh?" I grinned, feeling bold. "Guess not." We spent the afternoon talking. He told me about his life, how he'd left his small town after coming out, how he'd found a community in Ann Arbor that accepted him. I told him about Dad, about Mom leaving, about the weight of expectations I could never meet. With every word, I felt lighter, like I was shedding a skin I'd outgrown. As the sun dipped low, Julian reached for my hand, his touch tentative but warm. "You don't have to have it all figured out, Eli," he said. "Just take it one step at a time." I didn't pull away. For the first time, I let myself feel the warmth of his hand, the truth of who I was. It was terrifying, but it was also right. The forest was different with Julian. The same trees. The same shadows. But they felt alive. Vibrant. Like they were part of the secret we were sharing. His hand in mine was a quiet revolution. A defiance of everything I'd been taught to fear. But when Tom's heavy footsteps crunched through the leaves, I pulled away, my heart lurching with guilt I couldn't shake. Tom's face was a storm cloud as he dropped his gear. No luck, he muttered, glaring at Julian. What's he still doing here? Julian stood, calm as ever. Just keeping Eli company. You got a problem with that? Tom's jaw tightened, but he didn't answer. Instead, he turned to me. We're moving camp tomorrow. Deeper in. Maybe we'll actually find something if you stop daydreaming. I nodded, avoiding his eyes. Julian didn't say anything, but I felt his gaze, steady and reassuring. That night, as Tom slept, Julian and I sat by the fire again, our voices low. He told me about his first love, a boy from his high school who'd broken his heart but taught him to be fearless. I listened, hanging on every word, wishing I could be that brave. You ever been in love? He asked, his tone gentle. I shook my head, my throat tight. Never had the chance. Never. Let myself. He reached for my hand again, and this time, I didn't pull away. You will, he said, when you're ready. The next day, we packed up and moved deeper into the forest. Tom was relentless, pushing us through thick underbrush and steep hills. Julian followed at a distance, despite Tom's protests, and I was grateful for it. Every glance we shared felt like a promise, a tether to something real. By afternoon, we reached a new clearing, a vast expanse surrounded by towering pines. Tom was scanning the ground for tracks when Julian caught up, his expression tense. You shouldn't be here, he said, his voice low. This area is not safe. Tom scoffed. What? You're the forest expert now. Julian ignored him, looking at me. There's a reason I avoid this spot. Hunters come through here, and not all of them are friendly. As if on cue, we heard voices rough, loud, coming from the east. Tom grabbed his rifle, his eyes narrowing. Stay here, he ordered, but Julian shook his head. We need to move, Julian said. Now. Before I could argue, the voices grew closer, accompanied by the crunch of boots. 3 men emerged, all armed, their faces hard. The one in front, a burly guy with a scar across his cheek, eyed us like we were prey. What do we have here? He said, his voice dripping with menace. Tom stepped forward, his rifle ready. Just hunting. You. The man grinned, but it wasn't friendly. Same. But we don't take kindly to strangers on our turf. Julian moved closer to me, his shoulder brushing mine. We're leaving, he said firmly. No trouble. The man's eyes lingered on Julian, then me, and I saw the same hatred I'd seen in the drunk from the clearing. You two look cozy, he sneered. This ain't no place for that. My stomach dropped. Tom's face hardened, and for a moment, I thought he'd defend us. But he just stood there, silent, his rifle still raised. The silence was worse than any insult. Julian grabbed my arm. Come on, Eli, he said, his voice steady despite the tension. Let's go. We backed away, the men watching us like wolves. Tom followed, but his silence felt like a betrayal. As we retreated, Julian's hand found mine again, squeezing tight. You're okay, he whispered. I've got you. We didn't stop until we were miles away, the voices fading into the forest. Tom set up camp in silence, his back to us, and I knew things had changed. He'd seen the way Julian looked at me, the way I hadn't pulled away, and he wasn't okay with it. That night, Julian and I sat by the stream, away from Tom. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice breaking, "for all of this." "Don't be," Julian said. "You stood up to that guy yesterday. You're stronger than you think." I wanted to believe him, but the weight of Tom's judgment, of the world I'd go back to, pressed down on me. Julian leaned closer, his breath warm against my cheek. "You don't have to face it alone," he said. "Not anymore." When his lips brushed mine, soft and tentative, the world fell away. It was my first kiss, and it felt like coming home. The kiss lingered in my mind, a quiet wildfire that burned through every doubt I'd carried. Julian's lips had been soft but sure, and in that moment, I wasn't the scared kid from Lansing anymore. I was just Eli, feeling something true for the first time. But the weight of Tom's presence loomed like a storm cloud, and I knew the forest wasn't the only place I'd have to face danger. Morning came too soon, the air heavy with tension. Tom barely spoke, his eyes avoiding mine as we packed up. Julian stayed close, his presence a shield against Tom's silent judgment. "We should head back," Julian said, glancing at the sky. "Storm's coming." Tom grunted, slinging his rifle over his shoulder. "We're not done yet. I didn't come out here to go home empty-handed." I wanted to argue, to say I was done pretending, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I followed, my heart split between the safety of silence and the pull of Julian's courage. We trekked through the forest, the air growing colder, the sky graying with clouds. Julian walked beside me, his hand brushing mine when Tom wasn't looking, and each touch felt like a promise. By midday, we stumbled across fresh deer tracks, and Tom's mood lifted, his focus razor sharp. "This is it," he said, crouching to study the ground. "Stay quiet, Eli. Don't screw this up." Julian rolled his eyes, but said nothing, keeping pace with us. The tracks led us deeper, into a part of the forest where the trees were so dense the light barely reached the ground. My stomach twisted, not from the hunt, but from the growing sense that we weren't alone. I kept glancing at Julian, his calm grounding me, but I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes in the shadows. Then we saw a buck, massive and still, grazing in a small clearing. Tom's face lit up, his rifle already raised. "Stay back," he whispered, his voice tight with excitement. I froze, my heart pounding, but not for the deer. I didn't want to watch it die. Before Tom could shoot, a shout broke the silence harsh, angry, from the trees behind us. It was the scarred man from yesterday, flanked by his two friends, their rifles gleaming. "Thought I told you to stay off our turf," he snarled, stepping closer. Tom lowered his rifle but didn't back down. "We're just hunting," he said, his voice steady. "Same as you." The man laughed, a cold, ugly sound. "Hunting, huh? Looks like you're hunting more than deer." His eyes flicked to Julian and me, and I felt the weight of his words like a blade. Julian stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "We're leaving. No need for trouble." But the man wasn't listening. He raised his rifle, pointing it at Julian. "You don't belong here," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "None of you do." Time slowed. I saw Tom hesitate, his rifle still lowered, his loyalty torn. I saw Julian's jaw tighten, his body braced but unarmed. And I saw myself, standing there, useless, until something snapped inside me. "Stop!" I shouted, stepping in front of Julian, my voice louder than I'd ever heard it. "Put the gun down." The man blinked, surprised, then laughed. "Kid's got guts," he said, but he didn't lower the rifle. Tom finally raised his, aiming at the man, but his eyes darted to me, and I saw the conflict, their anger, confusion, maybe even shame. Eli, get back, Tom said, but I didn't move. Julian's hand grazed my arm. A silent thank you, and I felt a surge of strength I didn't know I had. The standoff lasted seconds, but felt like hours. Finally, the man lowered his rifle, spitting on the ground. Get out of here, he said, and don't come back. We didn't wait. We grabbed our gear and moved. Fast, the forest blurring around us. Julian stayed close, his hand finding mine as we ran. And even in the chaos, that touch kept me steady. Tom trailed behind, silent, his face unreadable. We didn't stop until we reached a new campsite, far from the clearing. Tom started a fire, his movements mechanical, and I knew he was wrestling with what he'd seen me standing up for Julian, the way we'd stood together. Julian sat beside me, his shoulder against mine, and for once, I didn't care what Tom thought. You were brave back there, Julian said softly, his eyes warm. I'm proud of you. I swallowed, my throat tight. I was scared out of my mind. He smiled. That's what makes it brave. Tom didn't join us by the fire. He stayed by the tent, cleaning his rifle, his silence louder than any words. I knew I'd crossed a line, one I couldn't uncross. And for the first time, I was okay with that. The rain came that night, a steady downpour that turned the forest floor to mud. We huddled under a tarp, the fire sputtering, and Tom's silence grew heavier, a wall between us. Julian's presence was my only anchor, his quiet strength pulling me through the storm, both the one outside and the one in my head. By morning, the rain had stopped, but the air was thick with tension. Tom was up early, packing with a grim determination. We're heading back today, he said, not looking at me. This trip's been a bust. I nodded, relief washing over me. I was done with hunting, done with pretending. But I wasn't ready to face Dad, to explain why Tom's jaw was set so tight, why his eyes avoided mine. Julian packed his own gear, his movements calm but deliberate. I'll walk with you to the trailhead, he said, and I clung to the promise of a few more hours with him. The hike back was grueling, the mud sucking at our boots, the air heavy with unspoken words. Tom led the way, his pace brutal, like he was trying to outrun what had happened. Julian stayed by my side, his presence a quiet rebellion against Tom's disapproval. We didn't talk much, but every glance we shared felt like a conversation, a thread tying us together. At a rest stop, Tom finally broke his silence. You gonna tell your dad about this? He asked, his voice low, his eyes on the ground. About what? I said, though I knew exactly what he meant. He looked at me then, his expression hard. You know what? That stuff with him. He jerked his head toward Julian, who was filling his canteen at a stream. My face burned, but I held his gaze. It's not your business, Tom. He laughed, a bitter sound. Your dad's gonna lose it, kid. You think he'll be okay with this? I didn't answer, because I didn't know. Dad had never talked about this stuff, but I'd heard enough from the guys at the plant, from the sermons at church, to know what he'd think. Julian walked back, catching the tail end of the conversation, and his hand brushed mine, a silent show of support. Let's keep moving, Julian said, his voice steady. No point arguing out here. Tom didn't reply, just grabbed his pack and started walking. I followed, my heart pounding, Julian's touch lingering like a lifeline. The trailhead was close now, and with every step, I felt the real world creeping back, the world where I'd have to face Dad. The town, the life I'd been avoiding. We reached the trailhead by dusk, the parking lot a stark reminder of reality. Tom's truck was there, waiting, and so was Julian's beat-up sedan. I felt a pang at the thought of him leaving, of going back to a life where I'd have to hide again. Julian pulled me aside as Tom loaded the truck. "You don't have to go back to being someone you're not," he said, his voice urgent. "You can choose. Eli. It's your life." I wanted to believe him, but the weight of Dad's expectations, of the town's judgment, felt suffocating. "What if I'm not strong enough?" I whispered. "You are," he said, his hand cupping my face. "You stood up to those guys. You stood up for me. You're stronger than you know." He kissed me again, quick and fierce, and I felt the world shift under my feet. Tom's cough broke the moment, his eyes narrowing as he climbed into the truck. "Let's go, Eli," he said, his voice cold. I looked at Julian, my heart torn. "I'll find you," I said, the words a promise I wasn't sure I could keep. He smiled, sad but hopeful. "I'll be waiting." The drive back was silent, Tom's hands tight on the wheel. I stared out the window, the forest fading into the distance. Julian's face burned into my mind. I knew what was coming: Dad's questions, Tom's judgment, the town's whispers. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid. I'd tasted freedom, and I wasn't going back. The ride home felt like a sentence. Tom didn't speak, his silence louder than any lecture. I stared at the dashboard, Julian's words echoing in my head. "You can choose." But choosing meant facing Dad, and I wasn't sure I had the strength for that. Not yet. We pulled into the driveway at midnight, the house dark except for the porch light. Dad was waiting, his silhouette in the doorway like a judge at the gates. Tom got out first, his face tight as he grabbed my bag. "You tell him," he said under his breath. "Or I will." I nodded, my stomach churning. Inside, Dad was at the kitchen table, a beer in hand, his eyes tired but sharp. "How was it?" he asked, glancing between me and Tom. Tom didn't answer, just dropped my bag and headed for the door. "Ask your son," he said, and then he was gone, the screen door slamming behind him. Dad's gaze settled on me, heavy and expectant. I wanted to lie, to say it was fine, that I'd shot a deer and made him proud. But the truth was clawing its way out, and I was tired of burying it. "It wasn't what I expected," I said, my voice shaky. "I met someone." His brow furrowed. "Met someone? Who?" I took a breath, Julian's face flashing in my mind. "His name's Julian. He's different. Like me." Dad's face changed, a slow realization dawning. "What do you mean? Like you?" My heart pounded, but I didn't look away. "I'm not who you think I am, Dad. I think I'm gay." The word hung in the air, heavy and final. Dad's jaw tightened, his hand gripping the beer can so hard it dented. "You don't know what you're saying," he said, his voice low. "You're just confused." "I'm not," I said, surprising myself with how steady I sounded. "I've been confused my whole life, trying to be someone I'm not. But out there, with Julian, I wasn't pretending. I was me." Dad stood, his chair scraping against the floor. "This is that kid's fault, isn't it? Filling your head with nonsense." "No," I said, my voice rising. "It's not his fault. It's who I am. And I'm done hiding it." He stared at me, his face a mix of anger and pain. And for a moment, I thought he'd hit me. But he just shook his head, his voice breaking. "Get out. I need time." I grabbed my bag and left, my heart pounding but my steps sure. The night was cold, the stars bright above the quiet town. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay. Not like this. I walked for hours, ending up at a gas station on the edge of town. I had Julian's number, scribbled on a piece of paper he'd given me at the trailhead. My hands shook as I dialed, half expecting him not to answer. But he did, his voice warm and steady. "Eli, you okay?" "No," I said, tears burning my eyes. "But I will be. Can I see you?" He didn't hesitate. "I'm in Ann Arbor. I'll come get you." By dawn, I was in his car, the road stretching out before us. He didn't ask what happened, just reached for my hand, his touch a lifeline. "You did it," he said softly. "You chose yourself." I nodded, the weight of the night still heavy but lighter with him beside me. "What now?" I asked. He smiled, his eyes on the horizon. "Now you live. One step at a time." Ann Arbor was a different world. The streets buzzed with life, students laughing, cafes spilling warm light onto the sidewalks, people who didn't care who you held hands with. Julian's apartment was small, cluttered with books and sketches, but it felt like a sanctuary. For the first time, I could breathe. We spent days talking, learning each other's stories. Julian showed me his world art galleries, open mic nights, friends who welcomed me without question. I told him about Dad, about the fight, about the fear that still gnawed at me. He listened, his hand in mine, and with every word, I felt stronger. One night, we sat on his couch, a movie playing in the background, forgotten. "You ever think about going back?" he asked, his voice soft. I nodded. Not to stay, but to talk to him. He's still my dad. Julian squeezed my hand. "You don't have to do it alone. I'll go with you, if you want." I did. A week later, we drove back to Lansing, my heart pounding as we pulled into the driveway. Dad was home, his truck in the garage, and I felt the old fear creeping back. But Julian's hand in mine kept me steady. Dad opened the door, his face tired but softer than I'd expected. "Eli," he said, his voice rough. He glanced at Julian, then back at me. "You're back." "I needed to see you," I said, my voice steady. "I'm not asking you to understand. Not yet. But I'm your son, and I'm not going anywhere." He didn't answer right away, just stepped aside to let us in. We talked for hours, not just about me, but about Mom, about the years of silence between us. It wasn't easy. There were tears, raised voices, moments when I thought we'd never bridge the gap. But by the end, he hugged me, awkward and brief, and it was a start. Julian and I drove back to Ann Arbor that night, the stars bright above us. "You were amazing," he said, his voice warm with pride. I smiled, leaning against him. I had a good teacher. The forest had changed everything. It had taken a stranger, a boy with kind eyes and a fearless heart, to show me who I was. I wasn't just Eli, the kid who didn't fit. I was Eli, who loved and was loved, who was learning to live without fear. And as we drove into the night, Julian's hand in mine, I knew I'd found my home, not in a place, but in the truth I'd finally claimed.